Hello and welcome. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us on a Wednesday lunchtime. There are a few more options of things to do out of the house now, so I appreciate you still dialing in. For those of you who haven't joined one of our lunchtime Zooms before, my name's Anna Birley and I'm the Cooperative Party's Policy Officer. Those of you who have dialed in on lots of Wednesdays, then I am apologies if you are sick of my face by now, but it's really nice to see some new faces as well as some of you returning and joining us. I'm really excited by the speakers we've got for you today. We have a panel of three to bring lots of different experiences and views around some of the sort of more cutting edge of cooperatives. We had a tour earlier this week of Toad Lane in Rochdale, where our modern cooperative movement started. And now we're coming right back into the 21st century with a discussion about cooperation and technology and ways in which we can be using our values and principles to deliver digital and cooperative solutions as well, and make the world a better place using all of the digital tools available to us in the tech sector. So joining us today, we have Polly Robbins from Outlandish, Gill from VME Retail, and Chris Lowis from Go Free Range. I will unmute them and introduce them properly very shortly, but before I do, a tiny bit of housekeeping. First is that we record these talks. This is because while lots of you join us live on Wednesdays, not everyone's able to come along. We put them on YouTube and it means that people can catch up afterwards. So if you don't want to be recorded, there should be a stop video button. For me, it's at the bottom left of my screen. Equally, if you're not dressed yet, please also stop your video. And the other thing to let you know is that we will absolutely be bringing you in for Q&A. We want this to be interactive and I want to hear your views and experiences, but we're not going to do that until we've heard from our speakers first. I'll keep you all muted for the time being, and then when you ask your question later, you can either put your hand up using the participate button at the bottom of your screen, you can use the reactions button to do a thumbs up or a clap, or you can use the chat function to let me know you'd like to say something. If those aren't working for you, you can email events@party.coop and my colleague Izzy will be monitoring that and let me know of any questions that come through. And I think that's my housekeeping. So without too much further ado, I'm going to introduce Polly first. Polly has been a long time friend of Co-operators and the Cooperative Party and is based not too far from us up in North London, and joins us from Outlandish. They're a worker cooperative owned by their members. The profits they generated are invested in prototyping and developing new projects for social change. So a really exciting bit of work that I'm sure Polly will be able to talk about much more authoritatively than me. So I'll hand straight over, Polly.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, thanks very much, Anna and Izzy, for the opportunity to speak today. So yeah, my name's Polly Robbins and I work for Outlandish. We are a workers cooperative. We've got 10 members. Mostly what we do is we build websites for organisations mainly in the third sector, so large-scale charities, NGOs, trade unions and that kind of thing. And as Anna mentioned, we reinvest all of our profits, or surplus as we call it, back into projects which we think use technology to make the world a better place. And that's basically where I come in. I'm not a software developer. 3 years ago, we set up something called Space 4, which is the project that I mainly manage. It's a co-working space and an event space, and it's dedicated to bringing together people who work in the tech for good sector. So that's anybody who are like charities or freelancers who are creating digital tools for social impact. And we have a special emphasis on trying to support the development of new cooperatives. So we've got about 8 cooperatives who've come through that space and are now getting more sustainable and larger through the support that we provide them. We also do lots of training and skills-based training. So we provide free digital skills training, as well as some training in how to run ethical business and cooperatives. We've had to close the space since lockdown, of course, but I would actually say that, of course, in the first few weeks it was all quite stressful and we didn't really know what was going on. But I'm happy to say that actually lockdown has provided us as an organisation with quite a lot of new opportunities. So the first is mainly that you know, we used to only really be able to have people in our workshops who could come to North London because they were all in person. And what's been really inspirational is actually seeing now members from all over the world come to some of our workshops. And that just means that we can widen the participation and the networks that we collaborate with. So that's been really inspirational. And the other thing that I'd like to say is that we use sociocracy in Outlandish. It's a form of governance and a form of decision making. We've been running workshops for a few years now, but they've actually been quite successful since lockdown. We're finding that a lot of organisations who work in traditional teams are finding it difficult to collaborate online and run their meetings in such a way where they come out with clear actions for people to take and clear decisions everyone's bought into. And sociocracy can be transposed into an online decision-making tool quite easily. And you don't need to necessarily take up every single aspect of sociocracy, but one of the key things is that everybody takes it in turns in a circle in order to input on decisions. And if you're using Zoom, this has actually been really, lots of organizations have been taking away elements of it, maybe not the whole sociocracy, but been taking away elements of our trainings. And I suppose, you know, if I was to ask people something, it would just be have a look into sociocracy, have a look into non-hierarchical decision making, and use this time when we are collaborating mainly online as an opportunity to introduce some elements of the philosophy of those kinds of decision making tools into your organization. And if anyone would like to ask me some more questions about the details of how we make decisions, then I'd be very happy to answer them at the end.
Brilliant. Just making notes so sorry for the slight delay with my branded notebook. So my colleagues will approve. Thank you very much, Polly. And it's really interesting to get an insight into how other organisations sort of operate, make decisions, work together. These new ways of cooperate, or not new, but you know, ways of cooperating that maybe people were doing but didn't know the name for, or can learn from and implement in their own enterprises, are so important as we all sort of try and expand cooperation across all parts of the economy. I'm going to bring in Stephen Gill next. Stephen is CEO and CTO of 2 co-ops, and I understand is also writing a book about co-ops, so he definitely gets a sort of co-op crown sent from us to him for sure. We came across him through VME Co-op. They're one of the largest software companies in the world to be transitioning into cooperative ownership, which is very exciting, and all of you may have come across VME without realizing it because they operate in lots of the co-op retail stores that you all know and love. So I will hand over to Stephen, who will talk about a very sort of different part of the technology sector, but with a lot of the same sort of values and principles that he's applying that Polly talked to as well. So over to you, Stephen.
Fantastic, thank you, Anna. Just to mention behind me first to start with, I was explaining earlier, we just moved house about a week before lockdown, so this room hasn't been redecorated yet, but my entire house is flowers, so you just get a good look at it back there. So this is next on the list to get converted. So just a bit of background then. I've worked in the co-op sector for 25 years now. So I started with Scotmid Co-operative in Edinburgh in 1995, and I then moved to VME, which was a family-owned business in Northern Ireland, in 1999. And as Anna mentioned, VME is the largest supplier of technology to the independent cooperative sector. So 44% of the independent cooperatives, not group, the rest, the independent cooperatives, members of FRTS, use our technology. And there's other retailers as well, other non-co-op retailers like some NISA stores and SuperValue in Northern Ireland, for example. So I led a management buyout of VME in 2004, and that means I'm now the CEO and the CTO. I love technology. I'm happiest when I'm sitting coding away. That's what I enjoy doing. But I have to do my CEO hat at the same time. And just a little bit of background, you were asking about COVID-19 and how it's affected us. So we've been quite lucky working in grocery that it's not affected us as much. There have been some stores that closed, and we've had a bit of reduced income, but we've not furloughed any members of the team, thankfully. So just moving on, I want to talk about why the co-op model works for the business. A couple of things here. I know some people on the list know this already, so I'm repeating a little bit for them, but bear with me. So 3 years ago, I love worked with co-ops for 25 years. It was only 3 years ago that I realized there was more to co-ops than just consumer co-ops. A little bit embarrassing, but that's the reality of it. So there was a chap called Ed Mayo that some of you may know. Ed Mayo was presenting at a Co-ops Europe conference in Malta about transfer to co-ops, about converting private companies into cooperatives. And I'd always been thinking about what would be the eventual exit strategy. And to be honest, I was a bit scared because I knew that a trade sale to a competitor would probably result in job losses. And it would also, I think, affect the relationship, the great relationship that VME had with its customers. So this really, rung true to me. So I did a bit of research, and after the conference, I discovered something called Fair Shares, which some of you may be aware of. Rory Ridley Duff had a few meetings with, and I loved the concept of multi-stakeholder cooperative, bringing in the different stakeholders, and it just seemed a complete no-brainer to me. So I looked through that in a bit more detail. I had this idea of a non-voting investor share class. So an alternative to withdrawal share capital, that you could actually raise capital. And I thought this really sort of got the brain cells going. So anyway, I convinced the VME board conversion to co-op is the right route to go. It solves everything. The employees keep building the things they enjoy. Customers get the same good service, and the shareholders get their eventual exit. But the only problem is that they would have to accept an exit over time, which could be many years. And I think this is a big stumbling block to converting a lot of private companies to cooperatives, because ultimately the attractiveness of one big check tends to weigh over most capitalists anyway. So if we want to convert them from capitalism to cooperation, this is why I came up with an idea for Co-op Exchange. So Co-op Exchange, basically, it's not live yet. It's in the process of hopefully live early next year, hopefully. Basically, it's a mobile app to buy and sell non-voting investor shares. It's a way to raise capital. So there's 3 things I wanted to mention. I'll be as quick as I can here. One, it facilitates private companies converting to co-ops, because it provides the money through the kind of like crowdfunding, and it's provided on day one. Secondly, it allows new co-ops, especially tech co-ops, to start, to be created, because it provides the capital that they need. And one of the biggest problems in the world right now is that the old saying, you need money to make money. In my travels across the world in cooperation circles, I've met loads of amazing people, and even more amazing people that don't have enough money to be able to go and do something. Some brilliant ideas, some really, really clever people. They just don't have the money to be able to give up the job that they're doing at the moment. They need to, feed themselves. And that's a problem. So raising capital can be solved in this way. And then finally, on that point, wealth distribution. So probably the most important point. Very briefly, the idea behind Co-op Exchange is to allow everyone, the public, to invest from as little as 1 cent. And we think that could go some way to helping eradicate poverty, because at the moment you need money to make money. So it's the VCs, with tech co-ops especially, that actually make all the money. So they list the whatever it may be in the stock market, they get their billions, the public buy in thinking this is great, it's going to be like Facebook, it's going to go to the moon. And then the price craters, as often is the case. So we want a cooperative through alternative. So last kind of real point here I want to make very, very briefly. We talked about why the co-op, or was asked about why the co-op model can ensure greater job security. I don't actually have much to add, but I wanted to make one point, which it was great to hear from Polly, which is I'm a big fan, and I'm just learning about sociocracy. Collective decision making, I think, is the future. And in co-ops, I have seen examples of power-hungry individuals, middle managers, let's call it, and that can cause real problems for co-ops. So I do think sociocracy is something that the co-op party should push going forward. And I'll pause at that point because there's lots to talk about, so we can go over questions and answers. So thank you, Anna.
Fabulous, thank you, Stephen. And last but by no means least, I will bring in Chris, who I've spotted further down my screen. So I'll unmute you, Chris. Oh, you beat me to it. Chris Lowis, that comes from Go Free Range. Their website claims they're the unicorn riding horsemen of the awesome apocalypse. I'm a bit disappointed not to actually have any unicorns on today's Zoom call. I apologise to anyone who joined us for the unicorns. But no, Go Free Range is a worker cooperative with a lot of experience developing applications across the UK. They were founded in 2009, so Chris has a fair bit of experience around technology and cooperation under his belt that I'm very excited he's going to be able to share with us today. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to meet everybody and say a few words. Yeah, you've reminded me we should really update our website. It's probably been like that since 2009. But yeah, maybe. It says something different each time you refresh it. So hopefully at some point it says something sensible. Yeah, so Go Free Range, we're a worker cooperative. We're currently 4 members. We're kind of flat in pay and organisation. I guess we do what we do because we're all developers, we're all software developers, and the opportunities for work in software development tend to be of 2 kinds. Either you're a freelancer or a contractor and you work on your own and you kind of move from, you know, gig to gig and carve out your own kind of lifestyle that way, or you join a company and you kind of build what other people say and you have some value extracted from your labor and so on. And some people do startups and they kind of get into the, you know, the exciting world of kind of raising money and building a company that they can sell. But I guess we were looking for a different way of doing things. We kind of liked the freedom of kind of choosing who we work for and why we do work, but we wanted the camaraderie that you get when you're part of a team or a company. And so we found that having a worker cooperative is quite unusual, but it works quite well for us. We've been going since 2009, that's when we were founded. We've always called ourselves a cooperative. We've had other members in the past as well. We've always called ourselves a cooperative, but it wasn't really until a year or 2 ago that we actually realised that if we wanted to join Co-ops UK, then they would want to look at our articles of association, and our articles of association have been, in a very agile way, just lifted off the shelf, and we'd filled a few things in, and so we decided to kind of legally change how we did things so that we could kind of formally be a co-op. We've had the great fortune to be involved with a network of cooperatives called CoTech for the last several years. There's 46 worker cooperatives that do technology things in it, and we've been able to kind of share work between ourselves, support each other. Sometimes we work on projects together. Sometimes we have an intern who'll spend a bit of time with us and a bit of time somewhere else. Those kinds of things. It's really exciting. And yeah, to sort of address briefly the kind of COVID situation. So I was just reflecting on this morning, actually. Like, I think the fact that we work together, we've known each other for a long time, we have a lot of trust between ourselves, has meant that we've been quite a lot more resilient in this time than we otherwise would do. It's not been easy for us. We've had to, 2 of us have been furloughed for a period of time. We've had clients pull out of projects because they've had problems, but we've kind of been able to muddle our way through it, and we're still here. And I think it sort of speaks to the kind of resiliency that you get with co-ops and worker co-ops in particular. Yes, my sort of thoughts for the broader cooperative movement, I guess, would be one of the things that I don't see an awful lot happening is non-technical cooperatives relying on technical cooperatives for help with their technology. Like, it happens a bit, but I think we could do, as a sector, we could do a much better job of that. And I think one of the things that so we sort of are big proponents of like an agile way of working, and I think one of the things that does, as well as allowing us to cooperate with people, we'd also be able to give incredibly good value for money as well. And that's not something you get, I think, when you get a fixed price quote from a large external IT consultancy company who kind of provide services in that way. So I think there's some interesting things that we could do around that. I'll shut up now. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. And sort of 3 quite diverse angles to talk about sort of technology and the cooperative sector, which I hope has given some food for thought. Now is the moment, if you'd like to ask a question, either drop me a note in the chat. I've got one from Duffield already, but if there are others of you, please feel free to mention it, or put your hand up and I can unmute you to ask your question. I guess I'll kick off, and Chris has set this up really nicely for us, is around of how do we grow the cooperative technology sector, either through our own endeavours together as cooperators, or what, are there barriers that exist that actually we need to be petitioning government to remove, or getting our cooperative councillors to support on at a more local level? I don't know if any of the three of you have a sort of wish list, as it were, that might sort of give us a starter for 10. Yeah, Stephen, I'll unmute all three of you and you can sort of hop in.
Awesome.
Great.
Awesome, Anna. There was one quite important point I wanted to raise. What was mentioned there was Principle 6. And Principle 6 is something that is imperative to grow the tech co-op movement, and the co-op movement generally, but especially the tech co-op movement. I've seen it in many discussions. I'll use Polly's Outlandish as an example. As I think Harry told me, was experts in big data was one of the phrases that was used before. And but there's a large consumer co-op movement in the UK, and Polly, maybe you could confirm, but I don't think you're working with any of the consumer co-ops at the moment. Is that correct?
So Outlandish isn't, but I believe that there is an organisation in CoTech who are now working for SUMA and also for the Co-op Group.
Okay, so that steps in the right direction. But what I would like to see is for the larger societies and other organisations to perhaps come up perhaps with some kind of pledge, maybe so a co-op party could fit in, about Principle 6, and about even inviting, big data is what retail is all about, and about inviting suppliers like Outlandish to the table, and to hear what they've got to offer, to hear what the solutions they can come up with, and at least give them that opportunity. And I do think the question should be is, why didn't we choose a cooperative solution? Why did we choose a capitalist company business over a cooperative solution? And I think over going forward, that's what we need to get embedded in the movement.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us all to be looking at our supply chains. And I know 100% Outlandish's is nowhere near perfect. And create a sense amongst the co-ops and also amongst things like local government or any other kind of institutions who should be socially responsible. So for example, universities and things, to say you should really at least have, a co-op on the panel that you're going to interview, or it's, you're at least going to accept some submissions from a co-op, even if, and like Stephen says, even if they don't necessarily end up being the right partner for you, to at least consider them first.
Great. Anything you want to add, Chris?
Only I'd say that there's kind of a chicken and egg problem, in that I think that thing that we talked about earlier about, being a cooperative makes you more resilient over time. I think it means that we tend to be a little bit risk averse, and I think that's probably just the case across the whole place. And so if you are a retail co-op, and you want to procure some, a big data solution, and you're feeling a bit risk averse, then do you go with an untried provider of that who happens to be a co-op, or do you go with a tried and trusted provider who isn't a co-op? And I think sometimes the kind of, the risk aversion kind of wins out a bit. And and that's sort of part of the solution to that seems to be to get more people offering a wider diversity of services in sort of as co-ops, as tech co-ops, but also maybe an education part around when you do procurement, that there's not always, no one got fired for buying IBM, sort of trying to break that mentality, and it's okay to take a risk, or let's do something small, and maybe we don't need to buy all the bells and whistles just now. We can try a little thing with a small co-op and see how it goes.
Yeah, or even for example, say there were like multiple consumer co-ops who needed a similar type of product or service or web application. It would be great to see those organizations talking about what commonalities they have, and what differences they have, because rather than just, you know, constantly reinvent the wheel, I think what we'd really like to do is get to a position where we can create one, say, product and then customize it for each cooperative's needs. So I imagine that most cooperative supermarkets have fairly similar needs, and they just might need some customization. So it'd be great to see those kinds of conversations happening before the commissioning process.
Yeah, no, and I think these sort of conversations around procurement are ones that a lot of councillors and mayoral leaders have been starting around community wealth building. I see some nodding heads, and I think I spotted Chris Penberthy from Plymouth, for example, earlier, who I know is doing some excellent work looking at how they grow the co-op sector in Plymouth. And I guess these conversations about how you make sure that you give a sort of level playing field for cooperatives to put forward their wares and sort of bid for contracts without being kind of swamped by giants like IBM is so important for that. And I think also some of those processes, you know, Chris, you talked about looking at your articles of association and what it means to be a co-op. Sometimes it's just a lot of hoops to jump through, and actually simplifying the process so that it's a natural thing to become a co-op, because it is sort of, it makes sense as a way of working, but sometimes there are barriers in place to getting there. And Stephen, you mentioned a few of those for the transition too. Right, I'm going to bring in some people other than me to ask questions. A note to people participating, usually I really like to try and make sure we've got some gender balance with our question askers, but I've only had men put their hands up so far, so that is a heads up to everyone else on the call. If you would like to ask a question, please do feel free to stick your hand up, or if you want me to read it out, you can send it me in the chat. James from Duffield, I will let you ask a question first.
Hello, that was wasn't it?
Oh, there we go.
Sorry, does the panel think that there are similarities in the way that tech companies work, the collaborative nature, using Slack and similar products that lead themselves naturally to becoming co-ops?
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to take two more and then we'll answer them in a round, if that's okay. Adam, you've got your hand up. I will unmute you, or you might need to unmute yourself. Lovely.
Thanks, Anna. So I'm a councillor in Colchester, so I wanted to really come at it from a local council point of view, and really ask, you know, are there things that councils do that get in the way of co-ops doing things for councils? Are there things that we could do better for your types of businesses? And is there are there sort of wider things that we can do around the support for co-ops in the local economy to support you as well? Thanks.
Great. And then third question from Neil Linford, if it's all right for me to unmute you, Neil.
Hi. Yeah, I was just wondering about a common theme that comes up is the lack of cooperation between cooperatives, and you know, very often it ends up being a cost-first procurement thing rather than a philosophical thing. The other question that I really wanted to throw at you was with the sociocracy model. When you get to a certain point in numbers of people, you tend to start to have a management strata put in, and the thing breaks down. I just wondered what people's experience was of that.
Great. So quite a wide-ranging set of questions. One around local government and barriers we can remove locally while we wait to change the government nationally. One around sociocracy and you know, is there a point at which you get too big to do it, and how do you overcome some of those sort of challenges that come with growth and maintain that cooperative ethos and decision-making process? One from James around actually, if it's, you know, technology is such a collaborative sector, it should be natural for them to become cooperatives, or not, and what are your views on that? Should we start backwards. So if we do Chris, Stephen, Polly this time, does that sound okay? Great.
Sure. I'm gonna pass on the council help and the sociocracy, because I think Polly in particular can, and Stephen by the sounds of it, can answer those a bit better. Why don't I have a go at the question about sort of the natural tendency of people in technology developers maybe to use kind of collaborative distributive tools, and whether or not that encourages formation of cooperatives. I think that's something that, yeah, I've definitely seen quite a lot, that people who come to, you know, particularly in the current time when we've kind of been forced everybody to remote work, that actually comes very naturally to people who are used to working, for example, on large open source projects where you have developers distributed all around the world who don't know each other, probably never will meet, but they still manage to like create software together in some collaborative way. I think there is definitely a tendency among the kind of old school sort of hacker ethos towards more kind of individualist libertarian kind of thinking, and I think that's like definitely a tendency within technology and within development. And you see less often perhaps the, you know, the cooperation in the sense of, yeah, kind of economic cooperation, I think. But I think there are things that change that, and I think it's partly about kind of a critical mass. There's been some talk about the idea of creating software licenses that would restrict the use of software unless you were a cooperative, which I think are kind of really interesting, but, you know, kind of quite extreme, but we might see where that goes. And yeah, I mean, in our network of cooperatives, I think one of the most successful things we've done is set up a discussion forum which anyone can join to learn more about what's going on. And it's kind of broadened our reach around the world and helped us meet new people. And it was something that we were able to kind of self-host and modify and change and do all those kind of, and set up and run ourselves in the course of, you know, a couple of days, whereas maybe non-technology people would have, you know, found it harder to make those kind of quick sort of innovations in their own spaces. I hope that talks to the question a bit.
Great. And now Stephen.
So I'll maybe cover Adam. I mean, I'm not involved in councils very much at all, but I do think there's one thing that perhaps you could help with in conjunction with the co-op party, which is getting behind some kind of formal, I'm not quite sure, I call it a pledge, but something to do with effectively a principal commitment to Principle 6, to cooperation, and leading the way so that you could show other organizations, look what we're doing. You know, our procurement process quite clearly states, you know, for example, it could be public information, how many, I'm making this up here, but just for example, how many co-ops were actually invited to bid, you know, how did the process work? Just start, you know, small acorns if you like, you know, but showing the way, because I know there's a lot of great cooperative councils, and this would be something that's reasonably easy to get behind, but I think it would need to come with the co-op party's backing, you know. The sociocracy, I'm going to let Polly really talk about that because she's way ahead than I am. I'm more of a fan and just starting to build it. In fact, ironically, I'm sure Polly and Chris will know this, but to implement it, actually, we built systems around it just because we're a tech company. So rather than just, you know, explaining to people how it works, we're using a system to show how that works. So, but I think sorry?
It's a blessing and a curse. Sometimes
it's true.
You have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. We tend to build systems for things when maybe we could get away with not doing it.
It's true. But all we've done is build it into an extension to our existing systems, so it works quite well. But in terms of number of people, I mean, the way we're going is split down into circles. So it basically makes subgroups of people, and that generally tends to solve. There's clarity around what that group is responsible, what that circle is responsible for. I think, Polly will confirm in a second, but I think that confirms the issue around number of people. But I'll hand over to Polly.
And sort of quickly before Polly, on that piece around sort of what we can do around procurement and local government, I know that Plymouth have been doing some work around their procurement, so we'll hear from Polly on sociocracy, and then next, I'll bring in Chris from Plymouth, who can talk a bit about some practical things that councillors can do or that members can ask councils to do and start asking the right questions. Over to you, Polly, on sort of decision making.
Thanks. Yeah, so as Stephen said, we kind of distribute decision making. So we have circles. So I think we have about 8 circles. So we've got a circle for tech, a circle for design, a circle for comms, and then we have a central circle, which is the members. Now, mostly decision-making power around anything to do with technology. So for example, which service should we use? Which particular tool should we use for this client? How much should we invest in upgrading different types of tech? That's all made, all those decisions are made in the tech circle. Personally, I would not be very useful in making those decisions because I don't really understand about servers. So they make all those decisions, and it's only when there's anything which is business critical or which is going to be extremely expensive, or it could be also, for example, things around, say, GDPR, which could have, you know, really business critical implications. It's only then that decisions would be brought to the members circle. And so in that way, we're able to kind of stay quite agile, and we get through decisions quite quickly within the members circle because they've already kind of been through a process where the real experts are discussing them. The Indian Youth Parliament uses sociocracy to make decisions, and as I believe that they've got more than 500 members, and so I do think that it can be scaled up. There's an amazing organisation called Sociocracy for All, and I strongly recommend you to have a look at their website. They've got loads of really amazing resources, and they also talk a lot about different case studies where it's maybe been used in larger groups or diverse groups or remotely. So for us, I would say that, you know, we are quite a small co-op, it's true, but I believe that even if we were to say double or triple in size, we'd still want to use sociocracy. And then, if I may, on the council's question from Adam, I thought that was really useful. We're in a really lucky position in that we work, we're based in Islington Council, and we already had some councillors who were already kind of aware of co-ops, and we recently have won the contract to manage a building for 10 years, cost-free, rent-free. And that was really thanks to us working alongside the council in advance to kind of raise awareness of co-ops. So if I was to try and give you some practical advice, I would say, first of all, raise awareness of what co-ops are amongst your council staff and members. And that could be just workshops, understanding how the economics of co-ops work and the benefits that they bring. Try to reduce any kind of onerous procurement processes. In my workings with councils, I found that they often need a lot, like very complicated due diligence, and that doesn't always necessarily seem to be that logical, because I always get the impression they just want to do a box ticking exercise, and that can be quite complicated for small businesses like ourselves. Put something into bids that you are looking for that you are looking for co-ops to fulfill your procurement needs, because that will just raise awareness amongst other people who are bidding for them. And then I think within specifically the tech co-op world, have a look at your legacy systems, and probably Stephen or Chris could comment on this more, but my understanding is that councils are wrapped up in lots of very expensive pieces of technology which don't work very well and were probably procured some years ago, and nobody really knows how to use them anymore. We would really strongly encourage you to have a look at what aspects of those can be broken down and maybe done in a slightly more modular way, where you could have technologies built by co-ops or smaller businesses. And again, I'm not the expert necessarily, but would be very happy to chat more about it.
As a local councillor, that is certainly a pain I feel about our technology and backroom workings. It's exhausting, and I think there's probably a lot of sympathy for that feeling on this call too. I'm going to take a question and an answer next. I've got a question from Ian Hewitt, who's patiently had his hand up. So Ian, I'll unmute you, and then an answer around some of the cooperation and local government from Chris. And then we'll do a quick wrap up, and I'll let you get some lunch. Over to you, Ian.
Okay, thanks, Anna. I'm hoping you can hear me, because I haven't checked.
Yes.
You can. That's good. Okay, I get involved with something called New Lucas Plan, and that relates to Lucas workers from the 70s. And we found that lots of people are really interested in the crazy ideas of the Lucas workers. Now, they centered on something called human-centered technology and socially useful production. Now, neither of those is a million miles away from where co-ops are. So I've been trying to push co-ops within that group, and they're quite enthusiastic. But one thing that's emerged is something called local industrial strategies, which I guess you've not heard of, or maybe you have. But they're all over the country and nobody's heard about them. And they're setting the economic industrial basis, local industrial strategy, industrial plan for the next 5 years. And they're crucial to regions, and they've been done basically in secret. So there's a research project at Leeds University which is mapping all these schemes, and we got lots of people together from Friends of the Earth and all sorts of people that are quite keen on reshaping the future. And we're trying to get some interest in the East Midlands around trying to get a new Lucas Plan alternative local industrial strategies together. And it seems to me that, might be something that you might be interested in. And don't you think it's a great idea? And why don't we know about these local industrial strategies? What's going on? Surely it's nothing to do with the government or politics or anything, but there's lots of potential, especially post-COVID maybe.
Great, thank you very much. And we always like sort of suggestions of where we can grow co-ops at a local and a regional and a bottom-up way. So that's fabulous. Thank you, Ian. And I will find Chris, if you would like to talk for not too long, but a bit about some of the experiences you've got in Plymouth, paving the way for cooperation, but some of the practical things that we can be doing to make it easier for cooperatives to operate and thrive locally.
Yeah, thanks. And we sort of touched on a whole range of different things in that conversation, which is interesting. I'll try quickly to sum up. For those who don't know, there is a network of the local government association called the Co-operative Councils Innovation Network. I have the privilege of chairing its Values and Principles Board, and Emma from the Co-op Party is one of our members there. So we're linking into the party, but the advantage of not being the party but part of the local government association is we are able to talk about some of these issues, taking off our party political hat slightly at the time, but getting them into the mainstream, and that's really positive. Just touching on economic development before I touch on procurement. The local industrial strategies are a government requirement which the LEPs have been asked to lead on, and of course LEPs are not democratically accountable. It's assumed that businesses will lead them and so on, but as we've discovered on many occasions and are discovering now, when it actually comes to the brown smelly stuff hitting the fan, it's not the LEPs who step in, it's local authorities, and we're quite often the first responder in economic crisis, and we certainly are at the moment. So trying to influence those has been really difficult, I know, and it depends how well your LEPs are cued into the social economy. So, if they're not, a hint to actively engage with your social enterprise networks and the like to make sure that people interested in good growth, inclusive growth, community wealth building are in the LEPs. In Plymouth, we do all of that, and we've actually got a strategy to double the size of our local cooperative economy by 2025. I actually have a capital fund to invest, and I'm finding it really difficult to spend because people keep on setting up as social enterprises, and the funding I've got is for co-ops, and people don't seem to want to give away the control as they set up an idea. So I'd love to invest in a digital co-op in Plymouth. If any of you are thinking we want to do it, we don't care where, please relocate. I'll help you with some of your capital needs, but talk to some of your other councils about that. I will make sure somehow we get it out, because obviously we're coming to the end of the bit and I haven't got the link. In a couple of weeks' time, we're launching Co-op Councils Innovation Network report on how we can, as local councils, double the size of our cooperative economies, pick up on some of the good practice. So that'll be being published in a couple of weeks' time, but there's also a webinar, and I think we've got 250 spaces on that. So do join in. In terms of procurement, social value is the big route in, because through social value, you can do local growth, you can do local spend, and you can stipulate some of the additional bits that you can add to a contract. In Plymouth, it can be up to 25% of the marks allocated through social value, and a lot of that is around inclusive growth and the way that people share their profits and do other things. So you could do it without saying just co-ops, because if you do just co-ops, you can be picked up. The social value portal, if you haven't got good social value stuff going on in your council, social value portal is a really good tool that you can sell out. It's accepted, it's cross-party in its use. So I would do that. Think a lot at the moment as well about recovery and try and influence your recovery plans in terms of local ownership and cooperative models. And once again, if your councils don't understand what that looks like, get them to have a quick conversation with Co-op Councils Innovation Network, and we'd be happy to help councils move along that journey. And we've got over 70 members at the moment, so that's a really positive bit.
For councillors or activists on the call, Chris, are you happy for me to pass an email address on to anyone who gets in touch with me wanting to get a bit of detail on that?
Yeah, or look to the councils.coop website. Nice, easy address.
Lovely, easy one to remember. Fabulous. Well, I feel like we've travelled the length and breadth of the country, sort of Scotland to Plymouth. You can't get much further away from that, and covered a really wide range of issues around how we grow local cooperation, as well as how we cooperate across localities using technology and everything in between. I think a big message I'm going to take away from today is the importance of P6, which my colleague, our P6 officer for the party, is on the call, John, who I can see dancing in his home office. So I think there's a conversation that we need to pick up internally around how we support that P6 and work with sort of the co-tech sector so that we can make that more of a reality. So I will pick up the phone as soon as I've had my lunch, and I'll let you all go and have your lunches too. I'm really, really grateful to everyone for joining, but in particular to Stephen, Polly and Chris for their contributions and insights on sort of the wider cooperative movement, where it's heading towards, and their particular cooperative journey. So I hope that they're sort of all conversations we can pick up and keep having. So thank you very much. Thank you all for joining. Please stay safe and look after yourself. Avoid beaches in Bournemouth, I hear. And yeah, it's, thank you very much, and I'll see you on our next call.